We're waiting for it. Bob Minsky, see if he's online. Call me.
He's right here next to us.
Oh, there he is. Well, I left a message on his phone yesterday.
Oh,
did he get it? You said he lost my number.
I'll be in touch.
All right, no, I have nothing to say. I just Chaim said that you lost my number. He thought you misplaced it, right? So I figured I'd call you to give you my number again. I'm pretty cut. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, Ira, it's good to always have your energy.
Yeah, if I had half of yours, I'd be all right.
So we are here holding in the Gemara in Mesechta Megillah, Daf Tesvav Hatzvi-Bais 15b, about 2/3 down the page. The Gemara now is going to go through 12 different explanations for the same underlying question. How come when Esther is trying to advocate for the Jews, begging the king to take away the decree, she does it in such a roundabout way? She doesn't do it in such a instead of when she's in front of the king stretched his scepter towards her, the king is showing her favor. So now will be the best time for Esther to request the king to save the Jews. Why did she have to invite the king to a feast? Why invite Haman to the feast as well? And why make a second feast? So these are 3 questions which are going to be answered in these 12 different explanations in the Gemara. So says the Gemara. So the king tells Esther, Malach Esther Malka, what concerns you, Queen Esther? What would you like? Even half my kingdom I will give to you. So Esther says, if it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him, for the king. So it's a special, I'm giving you attention, and I'm inviting you and Haman. So you could sort of understand, like we said yesterday, if you want to make a big ask at dinner, you first give everyone to eat, to drink, get people drunk, and then they start saying things they don't remember. And then it says, hey, you pledged to us, $25 million. I said that? Yes, we have evidence. So he wants to, if Esther wants to get Haman wants to get the king to abolish the decree against the Jews, so then she's inviting the king to a feast and over there get him drunk. But if that's the case, why doesn't she go out to the nicest restaurant in Shushan, buy him a nice present, maybe have a beautiful music playing in the background? What are you inviting this this third party, the third wheel, Haman, to come? So that's what the Gemara asks. Panrabanan, ma ra'asa. What was Esther thinking? Shezimna es Haman, that she invited Haman to this banquet with the king. What was Esther's deeper intentions that she had? So now we're going to start off with the answers of the Gemara. First answer. So why did Esther choose a feast as the means to save the Jews? And why invite Haman? And why only Haman? Why not invite many different guests all at the same time? Rabbi Lezer says, Hachim tamna loi. She hid traps for Haman. Shenemar, as it says, Yihi shulchanam lefneim lefach. It's a pasuk in Tehillim, which says that the table of the wicked person is a trap for them. Whenever the wicked people get together and have a meal, they're always getting into trouble. Ask anybody, when is the biggest family friction take place? Always Thanksgiving dinner, right? Whenever people get together and have a meal, that's usually when things come out, and that's when people have disagreements with each other. So Esther was hoping that if Haman comes to the meal with her and the king, Achashverosh, something's going to happen. Some type of friction and drama is going to happen. Marsha adds on, is that Esther was hoping for a repeat of what happened 11 years before that. 11 years before, Achashverosh made a big feast, a big, huge meal, inviting the whole entire Shushan. And Vashti ended up getting killed by that meal, by that feast of Achashverosh. So Esther is hoping perhaps there will be a repeat and something will happen. And therefore, maybe I could somehow get Haman in trouble at this feast. That is the first explanation. Second explanation, Rabbi Yeshua says, Mi base aviha lamda. She learned to do such a thing that you invite your enemy. You know the expression, hold your friends close and your enemies even closer.
Yeah, I think
Right.
I think maybe Zkainim said right. No, somebody actually had said
Right.
You know,
So Esther, she learned from her parents' house to hold your enemies very close, to invite them to become close with you. Shenamar, as it is written, Shlomi HaMelech, King Solomon, Imrav Sein Acha Achileu Lechem Megomer. Shlomi HaMelech says, if your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. Because what you're doing essentially is just pouring coals on his head. All the food that you're giving him is just a means to destroy him. So this is what Esther had in mind in order to somehow find a way, by drawing Haman close, to find a way to use the opportunity to discredit him, to get rid of him. The Maral adds on over here, the words of the Gemara are Mi base avia lamda. She learned from her father's house. Who's her father? She was a descendant of Shaul, King Saul. And we say in the Haftarah of every single Machar Chodesh, when Rosh Chodesh is on a Sunday, we have Haftarah, which is a story of David and Yonasan. And Shaul HaMelech, at that point, he did not like David. He thought David was going to try taking over his kingdom, becoming king instead of him. He was very jealous. Says he had Hashem sent him a mental malady. And he says he invited David to come eat. Now, why did he invite David to come eat? And it says more specifically that he says, when the words of the pasuk over there is that David did not come to the Rosh Chodesh meal, and Shaul is wondering what's happening. And the next day, he did not come a second time. So Shaul asked his son, Yehonasan, who was David's best friend, where is David? And he says, Madua leba ben Yishai al halachem. Why did the son of Yishai, David, not come for the bread? Now, meaning that you have an enemy. Shaul had an enemy, David, and what he wanted to do, he knew that David wasn't hungry, because David had his own family, Yishai, which would invite him to their own korbanos, but he wanted him to eat bread, to eat next to him. When a person eats, their guard is down, he could find an excuse. So he wanted to give him food. He wanted to give David to eat in order to find a pretext that somehow he could get rid of David. So that's what it means. Esther learned from her father's house. Shaul, which is her ancestor, from there, that's where Esther learned that you should give your enemy to eat if you want to find a pretext to get rid of your enemy. And that's why she went ahead and she gave Haman to eat, to enjoy him, to invite him to a meal. Maral also has another longer explanation, more like a Musar, Haskell, something you can learn out of it. But let's go on to the next explanation. Rabbi Yeshua says, Rabbi Meir says, the reason why Esther invited Haman to the meal was, Lo yitel eitza v'yimrod. She wanted Haman to be close to her, that Haman should not get a whiff of what's going on. Something fishy is going on between Esther and the king. It might be connected to this decree that he just managed to get the king to sign 3 days ago. And he'll start trying to find ways of getting rid of Esther. And Haman, being the conniver he was, might start looking and finding things. So she wanted to sort of take away any of Haman's suspicions and to keep a watch on Haman. And that's why she invited Haman to the feast of Achashverosh, to make sure that Haman can't make any problems. When the Alter Rebbe was arrested the second time, put into prison in Pittsburgh, so after he was released from prison, they made a rule he could be released from prison, but he has to live in the capital city in Pittsburgh. He can't leave the capital city. And for 9 months, the Alter Rebbe lived in Pittsburgh. Alter Rebbe had a special house with a big courtyard. Chassidim would come and hear Chassidus. But the Alter Rebbe was not allowed to leave the city of Pittsburgh because the government wanted to keep a watch on him, keep an eye on him. Whoever is close by, you're able to keep a strong eye on.
It's like a Shlomo Melech had told Shishimi Ben Gera,
Right.
don't you leave actually Yerushalayim. He wanted to keep an eye on him because the Shishimi Ben Gera had put a curse on the King David.
Ira, what's that picture? Anyways,
to turn on his voice.
right. Another thing Rashi adds on over here is that Esther saw by Haman sheshaito mitzlachas, who's having a successful moment. And since it says whenever a Russia, whenever you see an evil person who is having a moment of success, it's not a good time to start up with him then. So Esther saw that Haman is being very successful in everything he wants. He's getting power, he's getting prestige, he's getting his decrees done. So because of that, Esther was very hesitant to start up with Haman. And therefore, Esther did not want to speak to the king without Haman being there in order that she could keep a strong eye on Haman. That's the answer of Reb Meir. That's answer number 3. Answer number 4. Reb Yehuda says, Kidei shelo yakiru ba shehi Yehudis. Yehuda says that the reason why Esther invited Haman was nobody should suspect that Esther is Jewish in the palace. If people would suspect that why is Esther suddenly risking her life to go to the king, it must be connected to the decree which was just signed, people might suspect she's Jewish. But because she invited Haman being the arch enemy of the Jews, inviting Hitler of that generation to a meal, so people would not suspect that Esther is Jewish. But can you imagine what that means? The Jewish people are saying, look what's happening. Here's Esther, and she's inviting the arch enemy of the Jewish people to a meal. Imagine inviting the head of the Gestapo, to Friday night Shabbos dinner. It's like what Jewish people. Esther was putting herself, not just herself at risk, but even her reputation among the Jews. She's putting at risk as well. Rabbi Nechemia says the reason why she did it and she invited Haman was Kedei shelo yom Yisrael. The Jewish people should not say Achos yesh lanu bebeis hamelech. We have a sister in the king's palace. We have connections to the king. We have a sister, Esther, who's inside of the king's palace. And if they're going to put all their trust in Esther, never mind, Esther will take care of it. So then they're not going to ask for mercy from Hashem. So in order that the Jews should daven to Hashem, that's why Esther invited Haman, that Jews should say, oh, Esther's a cop-out, a sellout. She's trying to ingratiate herself with Haman. And therefore, the difference of these two reasons, you could say, is to what extent Esther is having a serious nefesh. But here, although she despised Haman more than the Jews despised Haman, but the fact that she's ingratiating herself with Haman is making that the average Jewish person is now going to look at Esther in a very derogatory way. What? You're trying to get on Haman's good side? You're trying to put yourself together with Haman? So Esther is giving the delusion, you could say, that she's best friends with the BDS, best friends with anti-Israel and Louis Farrakhan and all these people, just in order that the Jews should daven to Hashem better, not to rely on her and to say instead to daven to Hashem, because that is what's going to get rid of the decree. Rabbi Yossi says, "Kidei shehei matzui la b'chal es." It's similar to one of the previous reasons we said, was that Haman should be nearby at any time, and therefore maybe Esther will find the chance that she'll be able to get Haman killed by the king. Maybe the opportunity will come up. So in order, that should always be nearby. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya says, "Ulai yargish hamakim, v'yaseh lanu nes." Perhaps Esther's thinking, inviting Haman was perhaps Hashem will see how low I have to lower myself. The Rashi brings two different explanations of this. One, that I have to bring close those who hate the Jews, or Hashem will see how low I'm putting myself, that I have to demean myself in order to bring myself down to Haman's level. And maybe from that Hashem will see, and Hashem will have mercy. That's Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha says, Asbir loy panim. I am going to act kindly towards Haman. And it says during the meal, Esther smiled and flirted with Haman, acted very affectionately towards him. Why? Kedei sheyahareg hu v'hi. Achashverosh, we know he's a very paranoid person, if anything. He had his wife Vashti killed. He was paranoid about everything. And so he sees there's plots going on over here. And so if she sees that Haman was invited to a private banquet that's supposed to be between Haman and Esther, between Achashverosh and Esther, Haman is invited. And throughout the feast, throughout the meal, Esther is communicating, non-verbally with Haman. The king's going to notice something fishy is going on. And the king's going to get very angry and will kill both of them. And since Haman will be killed, so she's going to die as a martyr, just in order that Haman should get killed. And there was a rule, a law back then, which Rashi Mesechta says that if anybody, a rule in the Persian kingdom, that if anybody made a decree, if that person was killed, the decree became abolished. What happened later with the decree of Haman? I'm saying when Haman was killed, Achashverosh said, I can't abolish the decree. So there's different explanations which say that means Esther didn't ask to abolish a decree. Esther was asking the Jews could defend themselves. She begged permission for self-defense. But her hope was that the king will get jealous of her and Haman, thinking that Haman and her are plotting something together. Maybe they're plotting to kill the king. Maybe they're he's planning to steal away the king. Haman has wormed his way into power. Maybe something is going to happen to Haman. Maybe something will happen throughout this entire thing and will cause the king to kill Haman, even if it's going to be that Esther gets killed as well. If she gets killed, her reputation will be that she is somebody who tried to run away with Haman, tried to seduce Haman. The Jewish people will never honor the memory of such a person, even if they were saved. Still, she was ready to do it to do anything it took, as long as she could save the Jewish people. Next answer of the Gemara. Rabbi Gamliel says, Melech hafach fechan haya. Achashverosh was a very fickle king. His opinions would change very quickly. He would change his mind in a heartbeat. He never held of one thing constantly. So Esther was worried that even if I somehow convince the king to kill Haman, but Haman won't be around, and then if I want to have Haman killed, we're going to have to wait till the next morning, and by that point, maybe Achashverosh will have changed his mind. So therefore, she wanted there to be no time for any regret. So therefore, she wanted Haman to be very close nearby, that if the opportunity would come up, the king would want to kill Haman, that it could be done right away before the king is able to change his mind about it. Amar Rabbi Gamliel, says Rabbi Gamliel, Adayin tzrichin anu limaydai. We still need the reason of Rabbi Lazar Hamadai. Rabbi Lazar Hamadai's reasoning that although we gave all these Tanoim until now, gave different explanations for the reasons why Haman was invited to the meal of Esther, we need another reason as well of Rabbi Lazar Hamadai, because all these reasons, the Maharsha explain so far only why Esther made a feast, and not in a different type of way. Why Esther invited only Haman and nobody else could be explained by all these reasons. Rabbi Elazar Hamadai will explain also why no one else was invited but Haman. So Rabbi Elazar Hamadai says, Tanya Rabbi Elazar Hamadai Omer kin asay b'melech kin asay basarim. Esther caused a double jealousy of Achashverosh. She caused Achashverosh of Haman. She caused Achashverosh to be jealous of Haman. What's Haman doing in my private feast? And she caused the other ministers to be jealous of Haman. Why is Haman the one being invited to the private feast of the king and nobody else? Well, how come we're not invited? So when you have court intrigue, a lot of people in court, and they're all jealous of one person, everybody, start murmuring to try getting ways to get rid of that one person. So if the king is going to be jealous of Haman, and then all the other ministers will be jealous of Haman. So if Haman will be killed, there's not going to be anybody who's going to try to save Haman, and nobody is going to be sad or mourn his loss. So all these reasons only explained why Haman was invited. Why only Haman was explained by Rabbi Elazar Hamadai, as well as his next two reasons of Amirayim. Until now, we only had explanations of Tanoim. Now we're also going to have explanations of several Amirayim, scholars of the generation of the Gemara. The Chassam Sofer says, the main miracle of Purim happened when the Jews prayed to Hashem and did teshuvah. Hashem accepted their teshuvah, and a great miracle happened. Now, it's happened many times before in history that the Jewish people sinned, they got punished by Hashem, they did teshuvah, and Hashem saved them. You look at the entire Sefer Shoftim, it happened again and again and again. It happened during the times of the Malachim as well. So that such a thing could happen is not necessarily a major chiddush, a major novelty. And you could even explain it away naturally. The king loved his queen so much that he was willing to kill Haman in order, out of his love for the queen. This last answer of Rabbi Gamliel, when he says, Melech hafach b'chan haya, he was a king which was very fickle. He would change his mind all the time. This shows you what a miracle the story of Purim actually was, because the king made a feast for already 186 days. He went to please everybody. He was going out of his way. Again, it's part of Achashverosh's paranoia. Made a feast for son ish for ish. Everyone should have wine from their own country, food from their own country, kosher food. Going out of his way. The rich people should be here. The poor people should be here. No one should be jealous. And he's trying to get himself on everybody's good side. And he doesn't go crazy after 186 days. And the last days, suddenly he goes Meshuggah and he kills his wife Vashti. And the queen now started acting Meshuggah and started insulting the king. And then he decided to kill the king, to kill the queen. And at that point, the Jewish people were being Russia. They were just having eaten and benefited from the meal of Achashverosh. So they were at a spiritually very low point. They were not fitting for a miracle. They weren't deserving of a miracle at that point. They didn't get fast for 3 days and nights. They were deserving of punishment, God forbid. And still Hashem had Rahmanas, had mercy on them, even though they did not do Teshuvah, even though they were not deserving of mercy. And Hashem prepared this big miracle that Vashti should be killed, or that Esther should come back. So even when the Jews were at their lowest ebb, Hashem caused good things to happen for the Jewish people. So the king was Hafach Bechan, he was a topsy-turvy king, that even when things were going not good for the Jewish people, even then they were not deserving of a miracle. Hashem already put miracles in place.
That's the Chazam Sofer, right?
Yeah. So actually, we could connect this also with what we're learning in Kuntres Umaayon. Remember we learned how Kel and Adnai together is gematria of Tzav, 96. Mm-hmm. And Tzav is a term for idol worship. Ein Tzav a lashon of Avodah Zarah. We learned that in Kuntres Umaayon just now. So Haman is a gematria of, figure it out. Mem and Nun is 40 plus 50 is
90.
And Haman is, and Hey is 5. So what do you get? 95.
Yeah.
So Haman with a Kollel, meaning with counting the word, is gematria of 96. Idea of Tzav. It says whoever denies Avodah Zarah is like he moide b'chol Torah kula. They agreed to the entire Torah. So Esther invited Achashverosh. The term the Gemara uses was shezimna. Why does she zimna? That she invited comes from the word zoimimim, witnesses, like Edom zoimimim, meaning that she. Why did she invite Haman over? Because she wanted to bring a contrast from Haman. Because Haman is idols. He had an idol on himself. He's the gematria of idols. And therefore, she wanted to say all these reasons, say, look at Haman. Haman is an idol worshiper. And it's not fitting for Achashverosh, for the Jewish people to be given over into the hands of Haman. Let's do the last few reasons of the Gemara. So now we're going to have reasons from the Amirdayim. Till now, we had reasons from the Tanoim, from the sages of the Mishnah. Now we're going to have also from the sages of the Gemara.
That picture, I had you on mute. That picture was Moshe Markel's three boys years ago.
Oh wow!
And that current picture is Yankala and Didi before they became from.
Moshe Markel, what?
Yeah.
But what you're looking at now is
that's Yanko Pellet and Didi
Pellet before they came from.
Oh my goodness, Yanko Pellet without a beard. But I still recognize him.
Listen, yeah, Mayor Neshama have an aliyah.
He was a teenager then.
Ah, okay.
Who's that? In that picture. But the other was Moshe Markel's 3 sons years ago. The other one.
Yanko Pellet and his wife.
Very good. That's there. Okay.
Yanko Pellet and his wife.
Rabba Amar Rabba says, Lifnei Shever Gain. Things work like a waves. You have a very big high, and then you crash. before a Russia, a evil person has a downfall, first he becomes very big, very powerful, and he gets bigger and bigger, and the balloon is filled with more and more air until the bubble pops, bubble bursts. So Esther wanted to inflate Haman larger, make his ego bigger and bigger in order that he should pop. So therefore Esther invited, in order that Esther should have a fall, that Haman should have a fall, she wanted Haman to be very great. So if a Russia, an evil person, is very great, it's a sign that he's about to have a very big fall.
Humpty Dumpty.
That's right. Now,
there's a saying: the bigger they are, the harder they fall. It's true.
Right. Similar to this is an Eshkol Sefer to the Tiferes Chaim. He lived about 200 years ago. He adds, like, to this reason, another understanding is that Esther wanted to remove any type of valid schus, any goodness that Haman had should not stand for him. Like we have yesterday's Chumash. Oig tried killing the Jewish nation. Why did he think he'll be successful? Because he had one schus, one merit, was that he told Avram Avinu that Lot was captured by the king of Amraphel, by the four kings, in order that even though his thought process was that he wanted Avram to go to war with the four kings, so Avram should get killed, and Og could marry Sarah. That's what his plan was. But since he told Avram Avinu the news, he told him the word that Lot was captured by the four kings, so he had some type of reward. And he thought in that merit, he's going to be saved. He won't be killed by Moshe Rabbeinu. And in the Sikha the Rabbi brings, the Rabbi says, what if he was actually right? If he would have tried killing only some of the Jews, he would have been successful. His problem was he tried killing the whole nation. And that's why eventually he was unsuccessful. So Esther wanted to take away any possible schus merit that Haman had by making him have lots of good in this world. Hashem, for an evil person, could give them good in this world in order that they should receive punishment in the world to come. So Esther wanted to take away any schus, any merit that Haman had, and there was actually one merit that Haman had. It didn't come out of his love for the Jews, but he was the cause that the Jewish people returned to Hashem. He says, we had this in Gemara, when Achashverosh removed his ring, it was greater than all the exhortations and the speeches and the talks by all the Nevi'im. They tried getting the Jews. There were 80 prophets, and none of them could get the Jews to do teshuvah. And Achashverosh removed his ring and gave it to Haman, and that caused the Jews to do teshuvah. So that one schus, she wanted that taken away from Haman. And that's why she was inflating Haman, making him so great. So now Haman can be destroyed. And the next answer, Abaya v'Rava, the Amri Tarvayu. Shocker, Abaya and Rava both agree on something. But Abaya and Rava both say, B'chumam ashis es mishtayim. He quotes a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, which says that the pasuk says that the verse says, when they are heated and drunk, I want to get them excited in order that I could destroy them. What it is that there was one night, I think it was the night of Pesach. Belshazzar was the king of Bavel, Babylonia. He was the last Babylonian king. And it was actually the last night of the Babylonian Empire because that night Belshazzar was later killed. There was writing on the wall that came. What happened? What writing was there on the wall? So earlier that day, Belshazzar, the king, he was a grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. He had a very large battle against Koresh and Daryavish, King Koresh and King Darius, and he won the battle. Koresh and Daryavish themselves managed to escape and survive, but he won the battle, and he came back giving thanks to his gods. He put on the vestments of the Kohen Gadol. He took out the kalim, the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash. He made a large feast, and while he's feasting, his handwriting comes on the wall. And he was already drunk at this point. And he called all of his wise men, and no one could interpret it. And he called Daniel, and Daniel explained to him how tonight, this is the words from Hashem saying that because of what you have done, desecrated and violated the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash, the punishment that is deserving to your grandfather Nebuchadnezzar will now come upon you, and tonight the kingdom of Babylonia will come to an end, and already even tonight will be given over to the king of to Koresh, the king Koresh, and or King Darius already that night. So he made a rule: nobody's allowed to. Told his guards, don't let anybody into the palace, because he didn't want Darius coming into the palace. Anybody comes in, kill them, even if they say they are the king. And that night he went for a walk, and he wanted to get back into the palace, and they wouldn't let him in. And he told them, I'm the king, and they killed him on the spot. And that night already, Darius, the one who was just defeated in battle, hears that the king is killed. He goes and he takes over the kingship, the kingdom, and the kingdom of Babylonia stopped existing that night, Babylon, and already that night Darius became king. We said the whole story once, how Vashti was a little child then. She was a daughter of Belshazzar. She went to her father's lap in the middle of the night, and she didn't know that her father was killed and was really Darius. And so although Darius killed the whole family of Belshazzar, he left Vashti alive. He had mercy on her, and eventually he married her off to his son, Achashverosh. So this is a verse, this pasuk in Yirmiyahu, it says, B'choimam ashis es mishtayim. When they're heated up, I will make a feast for them. I will make them drunk. They may rejoice and fall asleep into perpetual sleep. So because Belshazzar got drunk, he was killed that night. Esther's hoping for the same thing. I'm going to get Haman drunk, and hopefully I'll be able to get him killed tonight, same night. So we've had 12 different reasons given so far. Which one is right? If you ever read Mindy and the Golem, you have remember that?
Yeah.
So there's different the story of Eliyahu and Navi. The Eliyahu says you have to serve Hashem. The guy says you're right, and the next guy says the prophet of Baal, you have to serve the Baal. He says you're right. He says you can't both be right. You're also right, right? So which one of these 12 explanations is right? Esther is not around to ask. So who can we know that could answer this question? Eliyahu Navi. Let's see. Ashkecha Rabba bar Avua Eliyahu. Rabba, the son of Avua, met Eliyahu Hanavi. Amar Lei told him, Himan Chazia Esther the Avda Hachi. According to which of these 12 explanations that we just gave, did Esther invite Haman to the feast, and only Haman to the feast that she made with Achashverosh? Amar Lei, Eliyahu answered him, Kikuli Tanai v'kulu Amarai. It was in accordance with opinions of all the Tanaim and all the Amarayim, in accordance with the opinion of all of them. All of the reasons given are accurate. Now, in general, throughout Torah, you have what's called a rule, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. This opinion and that opinion are both words of Hashem. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel were both great tzaddikim, both great Talmidei Chachamim. So, if so, when they disagree, it's because of a different viewpoints that they had. Chassidus explains Hillel came from Chesed, Shammai came from Gvura, so therefore Hillel was more lenient and Shammai is more strict. Throughout the entire Gemara, the entire Torah, it's like this. So why over here is we suddenly have a question, which one of these opinions are right? And the answer, they're all right. Esther had in mind all of them. Answer is because when you're arguing about a Torah, this is kosher, not kosher, mutter, asr, tahar, tameh, when you're arguing about Torah, so then all of them are right. They're all words of Hashem. But here, we're not arguing about Torah per se. Rather, we're arguing of what was Esther thinking. You want to know what Esther was thinking? So then we're going to have 12 different reasons. So Eliyahu Navi is saying that even this is part of Torah. Esther min Torah minayin. Where do we see Esther coming from Torah? It's because that Esther is part of Torah. And all these reasons are actually valid and true. Every one of these 12 reasons have a validity to them. If you look over here in the words of the Gemara, the words of the Megillah, there are two feasts that Esther made for Haman. So the first feast says, Esther tells the king, if it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet Asher Asisi Loi. I have prepared for him. That's the first banquet. They came to the first banquet. And by the second banquet, first banquet, the king asked, what is your petition, Esther? What would you want? Until half my kingdom will be fulfilled. And Esther says, let the king and Haman come to a second banquet, to the banquet that I will make for them. The first banquet was a banquet that Esther prepared for Achashverosh, and Haman tagged along to this private banquet. The second banquet is a banquet that I've prepared for them. Esther's having in mind Haman by the banquet as well. Now we have a king. Right, this is from the Malbim and the Mesechta. Both say this idea. Esther was playing on Achashverosh's weaknesses. Esther understood Achashverosh's nature very well. And this is Rabbi J.B. Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yasher Ber Soloveitchik, gave a speech once, and this is from his speech on this idea. That Esther knew that Achashverosh was a paranoid person. We mentioned he made a feast for everyone to make them happy. Why did Haman become so powerful altogether? It says right after Bigsan and Seresh were killed, they made a plot to kill Achashverosh. Achar dvar ma'ela, after these things, the kings made Haman great. Achashverosh was so paranoid that that there's plots against him that he made everybody could have no access to him, and now the only access to him is going to be through Haman. He trusted Haman implicitly to protect him, and now no one could go to the king and from the king except Haman. That's why Haman became great. So now Esther is gradually ramping up the king's suspicions. First, I made a feast for the king. Then she made a slip and says, I made a feast for the king and Haman. He wants Achashverosh to become really paranoid, upset, like what's happening over here, suspicious about Haman, to already be on edge about Haman. Haman was, you could say, he also used out the king's weaknesses. Not only the king was so paranoid, he says to the king, let's kill the Jews, because the Jews they don't contribute to your economy, this and this and that. And therefore, let's kill the Jews. And the king agreed, thinking that it's going to protect him more. What the Yasher Ber Soloveitchik said was that what Beria was to Stalin, who Beria was a mass murderer. And he was the one who was the architect of all the purges. Stalin killed 40 million people. Right? And Beria was one of the mass murderers, and he himself ended up being killed later on. But Beria, what he was to Stalin, you can see Mach Shemai was what Haman was to Achashverosh, making somebody go through. So Esther is slowly but surely trying to get the king to become nervous and order that Haman should eventually be killed. And that's what happens. And we see the king did get paranoid. How do you see?
Did you say Stalin killed 40 million people?
Yeah.
Wow. And one quick question. Did they ever find the vestments from the Kohanim anywhere?
When? In the second Beis HaMikdash?
Whenever.
Yeah, they had it in the second Beis Hamikdash, but we haven't since then. It's all either been destroyed or hidden deep away. So we don't know where it is now.
There's no known place where today, right?
No.
Okay.
No known place today where it is.
Not yet. Okay, thanks.
But you do see that Achashverosh did become paranoid because that says, "Balaylahu," that night, the king could not sleep. Right? And the simple reason is because he's worried what's going on between Haman and Esther. So Esther's hope was being fulfilled. And her goal is to eventually show the king that, king, you're so paranoid from everyone else but Haman. The one you should be worried about more than anyone else specifically is Haman more than anybody else. Okay. We're going to do a few minutes of Kuntres Umaayon.
You're doing a great job.
Ira, thank you.
Absolutely. Perfect. Timing's perfect. The sound equipment, it sounds great on my end. Perfect.
Ira, now's a good time to make a plug.
Nah, it's okay.
No, okay.
Nah, I want to plug. I need a big audience.
You need a big audience.
Right.
Well, one day it'll be a big audience. Well, if all of us bought, so that's already.
Well, when Mendel gets me hooked up to his 1,000 followers,
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so ki'im al-yidei slapshus hamazalos shem levushim hamalimim umastirim. Page 333. You want to follow along inside? Page 333.
I do it on the screen.
333 over here. The way that Hashem encloses himself in nature, brings things down into a physical way, it's through what's called the mazalas, the middlemen, which bring the godliness down to the world. Which are the garments Hashem uses to cover over the world, on the light of Hashem, until you're able, Hashem eventually creates physical things. And this is in order that Hashem's beneficence that he's giving to the world should become physical. The kindness of Hashem comes from the world of Atzilus, and it's spiritual on its own. We say in benching, Hashem gives the world with his goodness, kindness, and graciousness. Hashem gives everything to the world. The root of all kindness comes from higher than Atzilus. Higher than Atzilus, you have Keser. And in Keser itself, you have Atik and Arich, a higher part and a lower part. And Atik, the higher part of Keser, is a source of Chesed, and Arich, the lower part of Keser, is a source of Gevura, for the source of judgment and being strict. Shemisham nimshach v'nischalik shefa chesed l'chol echad v'echad. From that source comes down for every single person in the world goodness and kindness. The Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim l'fi oifen kabbalas malchusa yisparech alav b'Rosh Hashanah. So, and Hashem decides how much of the spiritual kindness each person is allotted according to how much they accept, how deeply they accept Hashem's sovereignty on themselves on Rosh Hashanah. And according to the way a person does teshuvah, with true regret for the past, The Kabbalah amitis alahaba, and true resolve to improve in the future. The kiyum atayro mitzvahs b'sur meirav asetoyev v'peil mamish, to fulfill Torah mitzvahs, to turn away from bad and to do good in actual practice. So on Rosh Hashanah, Hashem decides how much a person will receive of the spiritual chesed of Atik and Arich on Rosh Hashanah. Hamshacha b'yom HaKippurim, he b'vchinas malchus d'atzilus. On Yom Kippur, a person receives from malchus of the world of Atzilus. V'chol yom sheches hashpa zachesed b'vchinas malchus d'atzilus u'mislabish v'levushim debriya tzir asiya lefi oifen avedasa itfilasai b'chol yom. On Yom Kippur, it's brought down from the bottom of the world of Atzilus into the spiritual worlds of Bria, Tzira, and Asiya. The year the Chesed Madrega, the Slabish Levushim Tachtoinim Yoser, and it goes lower and lower down every day. It becomes more physical, the kindness. Slabish Levushim Mazalis, Shaydeze Nasa B'Vchinas Chesed Gashmi Mamish. Till eventually, every single day, a person is judged once again, and it becomes physical into this world. So it goes down from Atzilus to Bria to Yitzira to Asiya every day, and it could become physical things. So that's all the reason for the mazalas, for these constellations, which are a term for physical means, why a person has to do physical things, why we receive our kindness that is decided for us through physical means. HaChesed HaNiksav, Kitzer summary. HaChesed HaNiksav Rosh Hashanah. V'yom Kippurim k'moshe hu adayin b'malchus d'atzilus deya aleph hu pasher adayin u'deya beis hu ruchni. The kindness which is decided for the person on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So, according to the first opinion, according to the sages, it's all spirit. It's simple. According to the second opinion of Rabbi Yossi, that's still spiritual. And in order for it to become physical, it's not sufficient for the kindness of Hashem, of Atzilus, to go into the garments of the worlds of Yitzira and Asiya. Rakis Lapshus Vamazalis has to come even lower down, past Asiya, has to come into the physical. And the original source of Chesed comes all the way from Atik, which is the higher level of Keser. That's the original source of Chesed, of kindness. It has to come down through Keser, through Atzilus, through all the worlds, through the Mazalas, in order to become physical. So we'll pause over here. Maamar Chav Daled is going to bring a mashal from the Baal Shem Tov to understand the idea of what it means to how to make all this kindness which Hashem decided for us, to make it into a physical thing. So we'll pause the Gemara over here.